Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 201st episode of the Bullvine podcast. I'm Bella, and today we're diving into a topic that's absolutely transforming dairy farm economics across North America. If you've been treating those bull calves as an unfortunate byproduct rather than a profit center, well, this episode might just change everything for your operation.
And I'm Douglas, joining Bella today to break down the beef-on-dairy revolution that's sweeping through the industry. We're going to explain exactly how crossbreeding strategies are delivering substantial returns on investment for progressive dairies, and how you can implement these strategies on your farm. Today's episode isn't just theoretical. We're talking practical implementation that could significantly impact your bottom line in 2025.
Douglas, I've been seeing more and more Holstein beef crosses at farms I visit. It seems like this trend has really accelerated in the last few years, hasn't it?
Absolutely, Bella. According to a 2024 Purina Survey, 72% of dairy producers are now strategically breeding to beef sires. That's not just a trend, that's becoming standard practice. And with U.S. cattle inventory sitting at a 73-year low and beef prices maintaining historic strength, the timing couldn't be better for dairy producers to capitalize on this opportunity.
Well, I can't wait to dig into all the details. Let's get started. So Douglas, let's start with the basics. Why has the dairy industry traditionally viewed bull calves as, well, kind of a nuisance rather than an opportunity?
You know, Bella, it's really been a historical mindset. For generations, dairy farmers have focused exclusively on milk production. Bull calves were simply a biological necessity to get cows pregnant and lactating. The collective sigh when another bull calf hits the ground has been practically an industry ritual.
I've definitely heard that sigh on plenty of farms. And I understand the frustration. You're running a dairy operation, not a beef farm, so those bull calves just represented extra work without much payoff.
Exactly. But the dairy landscape has fundamentally changed. With U.S. cattle inventory at its lowest level in 73 years, according to the latest industry data, the market dynamics couldn't be more favorable for strategic beef-on-dairy programs.
What kind of premiums are we actually seeing for these crossbred calves compared to straight dairy bull calves?
According to that 2024 Purina Survey I mentioned, 80% of dairy farmers receive significant premiums for their beef-on-dairy calves, with some reporting additional revenues of $350 to $700 per head compared to straight dairy calves. That's a substantial difference that can transform what was once a break-even byproduct into a genuine profit center.
That's a substantial difference. But I imagine there's more to the story than just selling calves for higher prices?
Absolutely. Those initial premiums are just scratching the surface of what's possible with a data-driven approach. The difference between a mediocre and exceptional beef-on-dairy program often comes down to precision in both planning and execution.
So Douglas, when farmers are calculating the return on investment for these beef-on-dairy programs, what are they typically looking at?
That's a great question, Bella. The standard approach most farmers take is simply multiplying the number of crossbred calves by the price premium they expect to receive, but that drastically undervalues the true financial impact. This simplistic math ignores multiple profit centers and operational efficiencies that compound over time.
That makes sense. What other factors should dairy producers be considering in their calculations?
A comprehensive ROI calculator must capture three interdependent financial impact categories: additional revenue, operational savings, and opportunity gains. Each category represents a distinct profit center with measurable returns that compound across your operation.
Let's break those down one by one. What specific revenue gains are we talking about beyond just the calf premium?
Well, the direct calf premium is certainly significant. For a 1,000 cow dairy with 30% of the herd bred to beef bulls and a conservative $300 per calf premium, that generates $90,000 in additional annual revenue. But if you retain ownership through finishing, you can capture even more value. Research from the Journal of Animal Science shows that crossbreds consistently achieve higher grading rates, which adds substantial value per head.
And what about the operational savings? I know reproduction is a key cost center on dairies.
You're absolutely right. Research published in the Journal of Dairy Science consistently shows improved conception rates when using beef semen on specific cow segments, particularly those struggling with heat stress or aging reproductive tracts. Even a modest improvement in conception rate can translate to significant savings in breeding costs and labor.
Sang, I hadn't considered the conception rate difference. What about calf health? Do these crossbreds perform differently?
They do indeed. Research indicates that crossbred beef dairy calves often display hardier constitutions than purebreds. With treatment costs for calf health issues representing a significant expense on most operations, even a modest reduction in morbidity rates can add substantially to your bottom line.
And you mentioned opportunity gains as the third category. What does that encompass?
This is where traditional ROI calculations really fall short. By strategically breeding a portion of your herd to beef sires, you redirect resources from heifer raising to more profitable enterprises. With the cost to raise a heifer to calving exceeding $2,000, according to research from Cornell University, breeding fewer replacement heifers liberates significant capital that can be deployed elsewhere in your operation.
Wow. So we're really talking about a multidimensional financial impact that goes far beyond just getting better prices for calves. Douglas, you mentioned that U.S. cattle inventory is at a 73-year low. Can you tell us more about the market conditions that are making this such an opportune time for beef-on-dairy crossbreeding?
The current market dynamics couldn't be more favorable, Bella. With the lowest cattle inventory in decades and strong demand for quality beef, we're seeing a perfect environment for premium pricing on well-conformed beef animals.
How quickly has the adoption of beef-on-dairy crossbreeding grown in recent years?
The growth has been exponential. Let me share some verified statistics from industry sources. In 2014, there were approximately 50,000 beef-on-dairy crossbred calves produced. According to CattleFax estimates, that number is projected to hit 3.22 million in 2024. That's more than a 60-fold increase in just a decade.
That's incredible growth. What about beef semen sales?
The numbers tell the story there too. According to the National Association of Animal Breeders, domestic beef semen sales have increased from 1.2 million units in 2010 to 9.4 million units in 2023. And here's what's really telling. Of those 9.4 million units, 7.9 million were used in dairy cattle. That's 84% of all beef semen sales going to dairy operations rather than beef herds.
Is this trend limited to North America, or are we seeing it globally as well?
This is absolutely a global phenomenon. European dairy sectors are experiencing a similar transformation. According to an analysis of auction records in Italy reported in the Journal of Dairy Science, beef dairy calves were valued 50 to 200% more per kilogram than purebred Holstein or brown Swiss calves. Meanwhile, New Zealand and Australian dairies have developed advanced genomic selection systems that integrate beef breeding decisions with overall herd improvement strategies.
So we're really seeing a fundamental shift in how dairy operations manage their breeding programs worldwide.
Absolutely. And the economic benefits extend far beyond simple calf sale premiums. Research consistently demonstrates that crossbred beef dairy cattle achieve better growth rates and feed efficiency than dairy steers. That performance advantage creates cascading value throughout the beef production chain.
Douglas, let's talk about the actual performance differences between pure dairy steers and these beef dairy crosses. What specific metrics should producers be aware of?
Great question, Bella. There are several key performance traits where these crossbreds outperform straight dairy animals. Research from university studies has documented significant advantages in average daily gain, with crossbreds often achieving 8 to 25% better growth rates than purebred dairy animals.
And I imagine that translates directly to fewer days on feed.
Exactly right. According to peer-reviewed research, beef dairy crossbreds typically spend fewer days on feed compared to straight Holsteins. That represents significant savings for feedlot operators, which ultimately translates to higher prices they're willing to pay for those crossbred calves.
What about carcass characteristics? I know that's been a historical challenge with dairy steers.
That's where we see some of the most dramatic improvements. Dairy steers typically have lower dressing percentages, while these crossbreds consistently achieve better red meat yield. Research from Texas Tech University found that beef-on-dairy cattle produce carcasses with greater red meat yield than conventional Holstein steers, and high-yielding beef-on-dairy cattle can yield as high or higher than conventional beef cattle.
Are all beef breeds created equal when it comes to crossbreeding with dairy cattle?
Not at all, and this is a crucial point. Research has shown significant differences between beef breeds when used for crossbreeding with dairy cattle. Some breeds contribute more to growth rates, others to carcass quality, and some provide better calving ease. The optimal genetics depend on your specific marketing situation and buyer preferences.
Does this mean everyone should just use popular beef breeds like Angus?
Not necessarily. The optimal genetics depend on your specific marketing situation and buyer preferences. Some buyers may pay premium prices for specific breed crosses based on their finishing programs and end markets. The key is understanding what your particular buyers value most and selecting genetics accordingly.
And let's get practical, Douglas. If a dairy producer is convinced and wants to start or optimize a beef-on-dairy program, what are the key steps they should take?
I recommend a structured implementation approach. First, establish your baseline by documenting current breeding costs, conception rates, and calf values. Next, focus on genetic segmentation, analyzing genomic data to identify ideal candidates for beef breeding. Then move on to sire selection, choosing appropriate beef bulls for different cow segments.
And what happens after those initial planning stages?
The next critical step is marketing development, establishing buyer relationships and value documentation systems. Only then should you actually implement the strategic breeding program with consistent documentation. Finally, you'll need to evaluate your first calf crop, analyzing birth data, calf vigor, and market premiums.
How do producers determine which cows in their herd should be bred to beef versus dairy bulls?
The most sophisticated operations integrate genomic testing to drive these decisions. This approach, supported by research from the American Dairy Science Association, allows you to identify genetically superior heifers and cows for dairy replacements, use sexed semen on top genetic merit animals, and apply beef semen on genetically inferior animals to maximize crossbred value.
Wouldn't breeding fewer replacement heifers slow down genetic progress in the dairy herd?
That's the fascinating part, Bella. Despite what traditional advisors might tell you, breeding fewer replacement heifers often accelerates genetic progress. Research published in the Journal of Dairy Science found that when only your top genomic animals produce replacements using sexed semen, you can increase your herd's genetic merit while producing fewer total heifers. This counterintuitive finding transforms how we think about replacement strategies.
What about marketing these crossbred calves? Does it matter where and how you sell them?
Absolutely critical point. According to USDA Market News Service data, there can be a significant price difference between commodity and premium crossbred calves, a difference directly attributable to the marketing approach. Random selection of cows for beef breeding and selling through traditional auction channels captures only a fraction of the potential value.
So what marketing approaches work best?
Practical. Direct relationships with specific calf raisers or feedlots who understand the value proposition of your genetics can increase premiums substantially. Documentation of health protocols, genetic background, and creating consistent groups adds significant value. The highest performing operations implement sophisticated marketing programs that essentially transform commodity calves into branded premium products.
Douglas, what are the most common mistakes you see dairy farms making when implementing these programs?
Based on industry observations, There are three critical mistakes that consistently undermine potential returns. First, breeding the wrong cows to beef sires. Random selection of cows for beef breeding can limit both dairy genetic progress and crossbred calf value. Instead, genomic testing should identify precisely which animals should produce replacements and which should produce terminal crossbreds.
What's the second common mistake?
The second is failing to develop direct marketing relationships. As I mentioned earlier, selling through traditional auction channels captures only a fraction of the potential value. Direct relationships with buyers who understand and value your specific genetics and management practices can dramatically increase your premiums.
And the third mistake?
Not having a strategy for mitigating genetic risks. Research from the Journal of Dairy Science indicates that improper sire selection can lead to increased gestation length, dystocia, and stillbirth rates. A comprehensive approach should include careful sire selection, particularly for heifers, avoidance of high birth weight bulls, and continuous monitoring of calving performance.
Those sound like serious concerns. How can producers ensure they're selecting the right beef bulls?
Work with reputable genetic companies that offer beef-on-dairy specific programs. These companies have done extensive research to identify bulls that work well in crossbreeding programs. Look for bulls with proven calving ease, especially for use on heifers, moderate birth weights, and strong growth and carcass traits. And always track your results and be willing to adjust your bull selections based on actual performance in your herd.
Can you share some real-world examples of how different implementation strategies affect the bottom line?
Research from multiple university extension services has documented significant differences in financial outcomes based on implementation approaches. The key variables that drive financial performance include the percentage of the herd bred to beef, the selection method used to determine which cows receive beef semen, and the marketing approach.
That would be really helpful. What does the basic implementation look like compared to more advanced approaches?
A basic implementation might breed 20% of the herd to beef using random lower producers and sell through the sale barn, while a strategic implementation would use genomic-guided selection to breed 35% of the herd to beef and develop direct buyer relationships. The difference in annual revenue can be substantial, even for the same size operation.
And how does that compare to the most advanced approaches?
The most advanced programs typically breed 40 to 50% of the herd to beef using an integrated genomic and sexed semen strategy. They participate in value-added marketing programs and receive premium prices per head. According to research models like those from the University of Wisconsin, these advanced implementations can generate significantly higher returns on investment compared to basic approaches.
That's a substantial difference in potential revenue based solely on implementation strategy.
Exactly. And that's why implementation strategy matters so much. The difference represents money left on the table without strategic planning.
Are there approaches from other countries that North American producers could learn from?
Absolutely. The beef-on-dairy revolution is global, with innovations emerging across major dairy regions. New Zealand has pioneered integrated genomic selection models that simultaneously optimize dairy genetic progress and beef crossbred value. According to research published in the Journal of Dairy Science, their approach has demonstrated significant genetic and economic gains when combining genomic selection with strategic crossbreeding.
Can these approaches work in North America?
The core principles, genomic selection, targeted breeding, and value-based marketing, translate effectively across borders. The specific implementations might need to be adapted for North American markets and production systems, but there's tremendous opportunity to accelerate program development through international knowledge exchange.
It sounds like there's a lot we can learn from these global experiences. This has been an absolutely fascinating conversation, Douglas. We've covered the dramatic growth of beef-on-dairy crossbreeding from just 50,000 calves in 2014 to over 3 million projected for this year. We've discussed how these programs can deliver substantial returns when properly implemented, and we've outlined the critical steps for successful implementation.
That's right, Bella. The beef-on-dairy revolution has rapidly evolved from an innovative concept to an industry standard, with 72% of dairy farms now incorporating beef genetics into their breeding programs, according to that Purina survey. The question isn't whether to adopt beef-on-dairy strategies. Most producers are already there. The real question is whether you're maximizing returns through precise implementation based on data-driven decisions.
What are the key takeaways you'd want our listeners to remember?
First, there's substantial ROI potential through crossbred calf premiums of $350 to $700 per head, plus savings from improved conception rates and reduced heifer costs. Second, use data-driven breeding. Genomic testing identifies optimal cows for beef breeding while accelerating dairy genetic progress. Third, market smarter by developing direct buyer relationships and documentation to boost premiums. Fourth, avoid pitfalls like poor sire selection that risks calving difficulties. And finally, consider adapting strategies from international models like New Zealand's integrated genomic approach.
This is clearly a transformative opportunity for dairy producers. For our listeners who want to learn more or get help implementing these strategies, where would you recommend they start?
I'd recommend reaching out to your genetic provider to discuss beef-on-dairy specific sire options. Many of the major AI companies now have specialized programs. Also, contact your local extension service. Many have developed resources specifically for beef-on-dairy programs. And of course, visit the Bullvine website at www.thebullvine.com for more articles and resources on this topic.
That brings us to the end of today's episode of the Bullvine podcast. We hope this discussion gives you practical insights to transform your breeding program into a profit center. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and join us next time for more cutting-edge dairy industry discussions. I'm Bella.
And I'm Douglas. Thanks for listening.